Alrighty, welcome back to A Gamer's Guide to Productivity. I'm your host, Nico Penguin, and today we have an incredibly special guest for our episode 49. Joining us is none other than David Fradin, a pioneer in the world of product success. With over 5 decades of experience, David has been at the forefront of building insanely great products at renowned organizations like Hewlett-Packard and Apple. He's trained thousands of managers worldwide and has authored several influential books on management and marketing. David's journey is nothing short of inspirational, from working alongside industry giants to leading the development of 75 products and services across 11 startups. Today, we're going to dive into his wealth of knowledge, and you know I like information, knowledge, and wisdom, and uncover secrets behind this incredible success in the product world. So, everyone, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure to give a warm welcome to David. So, David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleased to be with you.
And for those that may not know, where did you get your inspiration for wanting to excel so much in the business world?
Well, I went to engineering school at the University of Michigan and majored in interdisciplinary technology, which was designed by the National Science Foundation to develop technically trained managers, which then
Hmm.
eventually evolved in my career in product management at Hewlett-Packard and later at Apple.
No, okay, that's pretty interesting. And because you've been in those different companies and organizations, and you've been in the process of products. For those that may not know, what does that specifically entail? Like, do you review like the bumps on the product, or do you review the specifications or the software? Like, what specifically are you doing in that product management position?
People in an organization that are principally responsible for the success of the product needs to they need to know the five keys to product success, and this also pertains to games and game design because a game is a product. And I epitomize it in a mnemonic called SPICE, which is the reason my company's named Spice Catalyst.
Hmm.
And the S stands for product market strategy. The P stands for repeatable processes for the product development and for the marketing of the product. The I stands for the information necessary in order to make informed decisions. The C stands for understanding the customer. What do they want to do? Why do they want to do it? How do they want to do it? Where do they want to do it? How important is what they're trying to do get done? And how satisfied are they with the current solution to that thing that they want to do? And then the E is to have the skill sets in your company amongst your spread amongst your employees, which I've identified in my book, which was published a couple years ago by Wiley, called "Successful Product Design and Management Toolkit." They need to have 130 competencies or skill sets in order to have product success. About 35% of all products that are shipped each year fail in the marketplace,
Hmm.
primarily because those companies and those individuals are not following those five keys to product success.
Interesting. And you mentioned previously that you had at one point also been in the works at a game development company, or you had some games at one point under that. Uh, so tell us a bit about that experience for you.
You know, in the early 2000s, I bought a condominium in Maui, and I thought that it'd be kind of interesting to see if I could get a company started in Maui. And one of the businesses that could work well on an island in the middle of the Pacific is a game development company called Maui Games. It
Hmm.
was a company that I started. And
Oh, okay.
instead of trying to compete with the big boys on the platforms, the Activisions and the other such companies, uh, we decided to focus on cell phone games and to do product placement or advertising in cell phone games. So we came up with a series of screensavers. One of them was a fireplace called Light My Fire. Another one was a candelabra called
Mm-hmm.
candelabra, and another one was a virtual cigarette lighter, which was written up in the Los Angeles Times, where people would go to concerts at the Hollywood Bowl, and if they wanted an encore, of course, they'd stop smoking by then. They pulled out their cigarette lighter and turned on my virtual cigarette lighter, and the name of that little application was called Encore, and they would wave their little cell phones back and forth. We also did a frisbee football game
Hmm.
called playing golf, so it was called frisbee golf, located on the golf courses throughout Maui. And we had another little game, which was you ride a bike down Haleakala, which is the mountain volcano in Maui. And if you fall off your bike and go over the cliff, then that accident was brought to you by K2 Sports or K2 Shoes or Saucony running shoes and that kind of a thing. So we sold ads in those games.
Hmm. And those games that you assisted in developing, um, were you like doing the whole coding as well, or what part of the process were you overseeing?
I was responsible, along with another fellow who had experience in game design and designing the games. I was also involved in selling the games and trying to sell advertising in the games. And then I had a team of engineers, some in Maui, some in New York, some in other areas of the country that did the game development and the testing.
And how was it monetizing the games? Because I believe at that point it might not have been as popular. So was it like extremely difficult to get funding or monetization, or what was that a
Yeah,
journey like?
I tried to raise venture capital or angel funding, was not
Hmm.
successful.
Hmm.
I was way ahead of my time, and I made two primary mistakes. One is you have to be doing something that companies want to do, like to attract an audience for marketing of their product that happen to be on a cell phone. So I started this in 2003, I think it was, and RCN magazine, which used to cover the telecommunications business, credited me with having shipped the first ad on a cell phone. But a lot of people couldn't see any value of it. It wasn't until the iPhone came out that people began to see the value, and Apple had their own advertising engine. And there was a competitor of mine whose name escapes me right now, but Google bought them in order to be able to offer inventory for ads on cell phones. So that was one mistake. I was ahead of my time. I
Hmm.
needed to find 15 unmet needs, 15 things that people wanted to do, and then that would tell me that there's a market there and I should come out with a product. So I spent the resources that I had too early, and by the time the market developed a couple of years later, I was out of resources. The second mistake I made is I didn't go out and ask people what did they want to do. Would they like to play games on their cell phones? And they would have told me that they probably would, and that they would not be bothered by the ads on it. And they would have also told me if I had surveyed them what make and model cell phone they had. If I had done that, then I would have found that what Nokia told me. Nokia said that they had the largest installed base of cell phones worldwide. So
Hmm.
I naively assumed that that was also true in the United States. Well, it turns out because the Nokia phones were the least expensive phones around, they were widely distributed and sold in Europe and in the Middle East and in
Right.
Asia because they were the cheapest phone around. And there
Right.
was only two models of a Nokia phone amongst all of the telecoms in the United States on the AT&T network. And my cell phone games would not run on those two platforms because they were too primitive at the time.
Right.
So I found a company in Europe that could give away my little Light My Fire and Fireplace and Encore apps.
Right.
And people had downloaded about 10,000 of them in Europe at the time. But my advertising sales force was in the United States, and the United States companies had little interest in advertising in Europe, and vice versa. So because of those two reasons,
Oh,
resulted in me and running out of resources and shutting the company down.
okay. And how did you feel when you made that determination? Like, you can't continue doing this.
Depressed, disappointed
It,
that I had a vision and couldn't find many other people to share that vision with.
hmm. What enabled you to remain fixated on either the next activity or help you get over that what you deemed at that moment a failure?
Rich Relevance. Actually, okay, it just came back. And they had it was a bunch of
Yep, it came back.
engineers from Amazon that had developed an Amazon-like uh, recommendation engine. And I sold it
Hmm.
to Sears, which they put it on their website in a multi-million-dollar deal. And
Wow.
Walmart was looking
Oh no.
up at the company was training. I helped them write some training classes on product management. Um, so after I left that company, I decided to go strike out on my own, and that's when I started Spice Catalyst in 2012. My number one client is Cisco, and I
Hmm.
and my instructors have trained about half of all the Cisco product managers throughout the world.
Oh, okay. So when they need to do like certifications and whatnot, or is it certifications or licenses?
No, they're courses in product management and in product marketing. And we cover such things as how do you find out what it is that your customer wants to do, innovation, um, coming up with a articulate value proposition, and then being able to put together your strategy for the market called your product market strategy.
And so you're teaching this to Cisco employees, like information technology specialists, or like the business side of Cisco.
No, it's product managers that have that title at Cisco, and
Gotcha.
they tend to be in the engineering department.
Oh, so that's not in the sales.
No, engineering.
Oh, because they're in the development phase of actually making the product.
Yeah, they are the interface between the sales, marketing, and engineers working on the product, and they pull all the elements together.
Wow. When you were working at Walmart, excuse me, at Apple and HP, what was some of the biggest challenges that you faced there, and what enabled you to either overcome it, or how did you manage that?
Well, one big challenge I had at HP is that the technical writing people said they needed 3 months from the time the product is finished until they can have a printed manual. And
Hmm.
I said, well, that's not acceptable because we're not going to be able to make sales for 3 months after engineering was done. So
Hmm.
I was able to get the engineering team together with the tech writer and get the engineers to agree to freeze the user interface so the manual for support and for how to use this database driven product could be written in parallel with the engineering development. And we shipped the manual within 3 days after the product was released. And the sales force and the support teams were shocked that we were the first of the company as big as HP to be able to accomplish something like that. I was then recruited by Apple to bring their first hard disk drive to market called the
Hmm.
Apple Profile. It was very, very big. It was 5 megabytes in size and in storage, and it was very cheap. It only sold for a measly $3,500, and nobody could
Whoa.
nobody could understand why anybody would ever need 5 megabytes of space. And I think in my last sentence, we just consumed 5 megabytes with the recording of this.
Yes, that's so true.
So they noticed I knew how to manage, and they asked me to become the group product manager for the Apple III product line, which I agreed to. And after being on the job for a week or so, Steve Jobs took the executive committee offsite down in Pajara Dunes near Monterey, California, and they canceled the product line. And about a week after that, I was coming out of the corporate headquarters,
Hmm.
not knowing what I would do. I brought my putter to work, and my cubicle had a dog leg on the end, which was challenging to get the golf ball into the little receptacle. And John Scully, who was president of Apple at the time, called me into his office, and he was holding a super VisiCalc spreadsheet. And he says, "Dave, we've got $20 million in piece parts spread between our manufacturing facilities for the Apple III in Dallas, Singapore, and in Cork, Ireland. What should we do about it?"
Hmm.
Today's numbers will be about $200 or $300 million in piece parts.
Right.
And the company's sales at the time, I think it was like about $700 or $800 million a year. So it would have been a significant financial hit to have to write all that off.
Right.
I said, "John, what do you mean? You asked me what should we do about it?" I said, "What do you mean we, paleface?" And he didn't laugh. So I had to explain the story to him of the Lone Ranger and Tonto were galloping through the desert, and they got surrounded by 10,000 yelling, screaming Indians. And when I tell this story to Indians in India, I have to tell them I'm talking about American Indians, not Indian Indians. And Tonto turns with his mask and his silver bullet and on his white horse trigger to Tonto. It says, "Tonto, we're surrounded by 10,000 yelling, screaming Indians, and all they want to do is scalp us. What should we do?" And Tonto, who's an American Indian, says, "What do you mean we, paleface?" So I said, "John, if you give me the authority commensurate with the responsibility for the product line, we'll be able to go out there and market and sell it and continue to develop it until the market decides whether or not they want the product anymore." So
Hmm.
he said, "Okay, make me a proposal." And this is after I told him the story of the IBM PC, which was opposed by all the big shot IBM mainframe salespeople
Hmm.
because they figured it would cannibalize their commission checks.
Hmm.
Told them the story of a soul of a new machine, a mini computer developed in North Carolina because they couldn't get it done in their corporate headquarters in Boston.
Hmm.
And I told him the story of a friend of mine, Kelly Johnson, who headed up the Lockheed Skunk Works, which developed airplanes like the SR-71 and the X-1
Oh
and the
wow.
X-15 and so forth. And he was an independent business unit, and he could develop a high tech new aircraft in 18 months, while the rest of Lockheed would take 7 years. So
Dang.
John says, "Yeah, I agree with you." He was at a cocktail party before he joined Apple, and he was president of Pepsi America
Hmm.
and lived in Connecticut, just north of Washington, D.C. And his next door neighbor was the president of Xerox. And he said to the president of Xerox, "I've got a Canon personal copier on my desk. How come Xerox, which of course everybody knows never does anything original, how come Xerox doesn't have a personal copier?" And the president of Xerox says, "Canon put 10 of their best engineers on it, and they're shipping now. We put 100 of our best engineers on it, and we're still a year or two away from shipping."
Wow.
So John said, "Make me a proposal." I pulled together a team of 80 people, information from 80 people
Hmm.
throughout Apple, had a team of about 50, almost 15 people that wrote a 80-page business plan for the product line, looking at everything from sales, marketing,
Hmm.
engineering, product development, support, service, training, everything except manufacturing, and presented it to the executive committee of Apple on July 15th, 1983, which day will live in infamy, at least in my mind. And the final decision came down to Apple values. And
Hmm.
some of the values of Apple at that time, and Tim Cook talks about the importance of Apple values in the success of the company since then, with such things as empathy for the customer and good management. Uh, so at the end of my presentation, where I offered up different options, Floyd Kwame, who was then the vice president of sales and marketing, he
Hmm.
later went on to join the venture capital firm called Kleiner Perkins and was a consultant to George H.W. Bush on technology. Floyd says, Dave, if we pick the option of shutting the product line down or the option of let the market decide, and a dealer called you, what would you say? I said, well, if you let the market decide, I'll tell the dealer that we'll go ahead and continue to develop the product, support it, service it, market, sell it, so long as you, the dealer, continue to sell the product. But if you decide to shut the product line down,
Hmm.
Floyd, I'll give that dealer your phone number. And everybody in the room laughed and realized immediately that shutting down the product line with 23,000 Apple IIIs in inventory and 50,000 Apple IIIs that had been just sold in the last 2 to 3 years worldwide at a price of $7,000, including the hard disk drive, which today would be about $30,000, would cause the company to lose the loyalty of those 50,000 customers. So about a week after that meeting, Ken Zerby, who had just come back from Europe as a European Apple manager, and he was going to take over a number of the problem areas for the company, including the Apple III. He asked me if I wanted to take over a independent business unit, and he said, "We'll call you the business unit manager, or BUM for short." And turned out they let me have 17 people. We sold 25,000 Apple IIIs, generated enough profits to help fund the development of the Macintosh and to keep about
Yeesh.
1,000 to 1,500 Apple employees employed until I shut the product line down 11 months later. And then 6 months after that, Steve Jobs lost his job, and the company laid off about 1,500 people.
During that time period, you were busting your behind and you worked your way up. How do you feel, that you made it up to such a high level and working up alongside like a visionary leader? Like, what was that experience like?
Well, you just have to be competent. You just have to do a good job, and you'll get noticed. And be fair. And I had been previously an environmental mediator, so I knew how to resolve differences between different entities that have different objectives and goals. So I just employed all of that. And one of the things they noticed before they asked me to take over the Apple III is that the division I was in was paying for the quality assurance on a new operating system for the Apple II called ProDOS. And we needed a new operating system in order to support the 5 megabyte Apple profile, because the previous DOS was written by Steve Wozniak, and he wrote it in about 3 weeks to replace the cassette tape being used for storing the programs and data
Hmm.
to go to a floppy disk. And he never envisioned that storage would ever be any bigger than 143 kilobytes, which was the size of the floppy disk. And he
Right.
wrote the DOS quickly so that he could go to Las Vegas, where the Comdex Computer Expo was going to be there. So I
Wow.
had a lease on my desk at the time that had been released, and I lined out in a Gantt type chart
Hmm.
all of the key components of the development of the ProDOS operating system, and showed by drawing a vertical line that date and whether or not each of the engineers were either ahead of schedule or behind schedule. And typically, with developments of that size, well over a million lines of code, they always end up shipping it months, if not years late. So I bet Dick Houston, who was the engineering manager for ProDOS, that he would never ship it on time. He says,
Hmm.
"Yes, I will." I said, "No, you're not." And I said I would bring in this Gantt chart every week, and everyone could immediately see whether they are ahead of schedule or behind schedule, and nobody
Hmm.
had to be embarrassed. Nobody had to be yelled at. Everyone could just look at this piece of paper and say, Joe Blow over there, he's behind schedule, and Mary Doe over there, she's ahead of schedule."
Hmm.
So as a result of them noticing that I knew how to manage against the schedule, That led them to recruit me to come over to the personal computer systems division and become the Apple III group product manager, where I had other Apple product managers reporting to me for the Apple III. And at the time, there was two profit centers at the company. One was the Apple II, and the other was mine, which was the Apple III.
All right, I'm gonna ask you a question, but I don't mean it to be silly. I mean it to be a very serious question. So you mentioned to get up there you have to be competent. So how do you get better at your job and increase your skill to get as competent as you? Like, can you break that down?
Well, first you have to understand what management is. It's managing, organizing, directing, controlling, and staffing. Which and I had as part of my interdisciplinary engineering training, I was able to take management courses over in the MBA school at the University of Michigan. I was also later certified as an association manager and went through a short course of essentially the same types of things. And I had previously managed John Connolly's presidential campaign in the state of Minnesota when he was running for
Hmm,
president, and I had 25 people reporting to me. So you gain these things by education and or by experience.
interesting. And do you usually go to somebody to um, review like how you're processing or taking actions or how you're managing people, or do you just on the job training, like as you have the experience speaking with individuals and managing individuals, that's how you get to know how to manage and operate situations?
Let me give a couple of examples. Anytime that I would take over as the product manager for a product, I would go sit down and have lunch individually, one at a time, with each of the engineers and
Hmm.
with each of the people that I would interface with in marketing and in sales and in finance and in support. And I would get to know them as people and ask them what is it that they want to do when they grow old or grow older or grow up. And they would usually tell me. So I always had in the back of my mind when I'm negotiating with them or we're getting something done, that if I could help them accomplish where they want to go, that they'll help me do what I needed to get done. And the
Hmm.
second thing is I went and talked to the fellow whose name escapes me right now, that was actually the inventor of the Macintosh, and was sitting in his office, and I said, "You were the architect for the Apple III, right?" He says, "Yes, I was." And I said, "Who did you make that computer for?" And he told me, he described the persona of his target market. And it was very clear how the product should then be marketed. And he says, I've been here for like 3 years, and we shipped the Apple III back in 1980. That was 3 years earlier, though he had been there like 5 years. And he said, "You're the first person for marketing because product management at Apple were called product marketing, and we were located in the marketing department as opposed to the engineering department at HP or at Cisco." And he said, "You're the first person for marketing to ever come down here and ask me that question."
Mm.
Yet he had did did the product positioning, did the value proposition, did the key minimum viable products, and the personas, which are all major components of the first part of the S in SPICE, or the product market strategy. So I was able to use that knowledge to successfully sell those 25,000 Apple IIIs.
Wow. And so you think it's really impactful that you were able to engage with each individual on hand and see their viewpoint?
Exactly. And when you go into a meeting and you're trying to make a decision, if you have in mind what everybody else is trying to do, and you also have this background of all sharing the same values. At HP, it was the HP way. At Apple, it was the Apple values. You could say the right things to manage everybody to go as in herding cats, to go somewhat in the same direction.
And what would you say are are some common mistakes that you've seen from product managers, and what have been some suggestions that you provided that they can use to avoid?
By not following the keys to product success, as I mentioned earlier. One company I consulted with, um, they came out with a product which was an add-on to another Microsoft product,
Hmm.
and they hadn't bothered to go out and talk to any prospective customers to find out what it is that the customer wants to do. In another instance, it was a company that developed a supply chain software. So I went out and talked to their customers. They had over 200 of them, and
Hmm.
found a whole new market, and which was about 10 times larger than the market they were playing in. That if with just some slight modifications to the product, they could expand their business by tenfold.
And since you started in this field, how has product management evolved, and what trends do you see it shaping into for the foreseeable future?
Well, product management had its beginning in 1932 with Procter and Gamble. That was called brand management, and the brand managers at P&G, uh, they had gone on without exception since then. The brand managers have become president of Procter and Gamble. And those brand managers had full authority. They had a budget. They were the ones that paid marketing and gave marketing the money that they needed to go out and do the marketing. They're the ones that had the budget to go out and get market research done.
Hmm.
They were the ones that had the resources to track sales and how they're coming along. Then later, McElhaney, who was the guy at Procter Gamble that wrote a memo about brand management, that idea was picked up by Dave Packard and Bill Hewlett at HP when they started HP in 1938, and that was the beginning of what they call product management as opposed to brand management. A brand is the promise of a product or
Hmm.
the promise of the company. So brand management at Procter and Gamble tended to be a series of products in a particular category or a particular area. Uh, but when HP transformed brand management into product management, they took the authority away, but left all the responsibility with the product manager. And they also called it product manager. And most people, when you tell them that you're a product manager, they won't have anything, have any idea what you're talking about. So I wrote a fictitious memo. It's up on my website, spicecatalyst.com, and it says it's a memo from me to my manager saying, "Can I please change my title from product manager to product success manager?" Because
Mm.
as a product manager, when I go to a cocktail party and I meet a woman and she asks me, which occasionally someone asks me, "What do you do?" I said, "I'm a product manager," and they said, "What's that?" I said, "Well, I am principally responsible for figuring out the product market strategy, what it is that my customers want to do, where they want to do it, how they want to do it, why they want to do it. And then I figure the personas of the people we're going to target the product to, identify the target market and the total available market, make forecasts of what sales might be, write the value proposition, the key messaging points, the product positioning, the sales plan, the marketing plan, the support plan, the pricing strategy, the go-to-market plan, and so forth. And usually, when I'm no more than about 10 words into what I just went through, she'll turn and walk away. So, Mr. Boss, if you would let me be a product success manager, then I can achieve my dream of meeting someone, getting married, and have the required 2.3 kids. And if you let me change the title, you could be vice president of product success. And as a bonus, I'll invite you to my wedding. So I think one of the things that we're going to continue to see is titles will start being changed to product success manager, and the authority, that is the budgetary authority, will also be given to the product manager. So they actually become a business unit manager or a general manager of that particular product or product line.
And so, just to confirm that that product management is essentially a universal kind of a position that can be in almost any industry.
Yes. If you're in Hollywood or in news business, the product managers there are called producers.
Mm.
The game designer at a game company, they are essentially a product manager.
Oh, okay. So it's the same thing. Just every industry might have its specific jargon for that title.
Yeah, I think a survey was done, and there's about 250 different titles for the people that do the functional aspects of product management. And there are millions of people worldwide employed as such.
Hmm. And do you think, just in your biased opinion, do you think they do a competent job, or do you think everybody can, use some courses or use some further training in order to increase their skill set in
They
product
very much
management?
need the training. Like I mentioned earlier, 35% of all new products fail. That represents a loss to the world economy of somewhere uh, between a half a trillion to $1 trillion in wasted resources. And most product managers have learned how to do product management on the job. And it generally takes
Mm.
them several years, like 2 to 3 years, before they pick up enough experience to be able to competently do it. But if they took classes on it for my company or some other company,
Hmm.
they can shorten that time from not having any idea what they're doing to being very successful much faster than trying to learn it on the job.
So what you're saying is, or what I'm understanding is, for example, we may have a listener, a gamer, who's thinking about going to school, going to college after graduating high school. They might be thinking about creating a startup. And since you've created so many startups, would you recommend for them to do something like business, in getting a 4-year bachelor's degree, or would you recommend them, just go straight into the work world and work, or to try to get some training before they go and launch their own business?
I think just about every product manager in the world has got a 4 year college education. Uh,
Okay.
they also have to understand the principles of business. And
Okay.
then in my case, what I encourage them to do is read my book, Building and Sailing Great Products, get a copy of or take some of my courses online through Udemy. And I also have the workbooks for each of the courses. They're all available. All of these books are available under my name on Amazon worldwide, some of which has been translated into other languages. And there are accompanying workbooks you can get. So I recommend you put together, if you're starting up a company, your product market strategy. And if you've done your research of understanding what your customer wants to do by observing, interviewing, surveying, and using big data and analytics, if you have that information available, you'll be able to tell your potential investors exactly how much it's going to cost to develop your product or your service or your game, and what the potential market is for that, how much money you're, what kind of sales you're going to get, and how much profits you're gonna get, and you have that all put together from the bottom up from the market research I just described, as
Hmm.
opposed to going to a market research firm who says it's an XYZ size market and then claiming you're going to capture 5% of the market in the first year. Because if the market research firm's forecast for the size of the market is less than what they tell you, then your 5% is going to be less of what you thought you're going to get. And
Right.
you'll quickly go out of business.
Now, in your case, with your expertise, how do you typically balance creativity and practicality when developing a product or a service?
Well, whatever creativity you have, which is called innovation, and
Hmm.
innovation is nothing more than doing something better or faster or higher quality or with style. So
Mm.
if you want to innovate on the caveman and his piece of burned wood that he would write on a cave wall with, to eventually the invention of paper and a pencil where you wrap that charcoal with wood so you don't get your hands dirty all the time, to fountain pens, to ballpoint pens, to typewriters, to word processors, to word processing software. Those are all the same things that man and women have been doing for what, 10,000 years.
Hmm.
But it's just an innovative way, something, a way of doing that faster and with higher quality. So identify those 15 unmet needs, those 15 things that people want to do that they can't get done now, or they're not satisfied with the way they're getting it done now, like in the example I just mentioned, and then apply your creativity to solving those unmet needs. One good example is when the fellow started Uber.
Hmm.
He was living in Los Angeles, and he probably had the experience like many of us did. Back in the day, you would call a phone number to order a taxi, and the taxi doesn't show up. And now you're late to a meeting. You call them back. You finally get to an operator. They say, "Oh, the taxi's on its way," and it's not. And they call again, and finally it shows up, and you get late to your meeting. Well, he said, well, with this cell phone, smartphone technologies, why
Hmm.
can't you just through a web interface order a taxi and you can see where the taxi is driving around as it comes to pick you up? And while you're at it, you get put in your credit card. You don't even have to try to figure out how you're going to pay the taxi and wrestling for the right amount of dollars and change. Your credit card is automatically charged. You can add your tip and so forth. It makes it a
Hmm.
seamless experience, doing the same thing as calling a taxi, but being to do it in an innovative way, faster, quicker, and with higher quality.
Wow, that's actually pretty interesting because when you mentioned earlier, innovation, and now we see a prime example of taking something that was already working, not the best, but just fixing a few key points, just a few tweaks, making it unique, providing a name, a logo, a concept, direction, and then having venture capitalists, and now you have one of the best or biggest organizations that do that. And I did want to ask you, how unique is niching down? Is it important at all?
Well, that's what people said we needed to do with the Apple III. Uh, we would say niche that puppy, and instead of marketing it as a general purpose computer,
Hmm.
we focused on the business market, the office market,
Mm.
which at the time was just beginning to get penetrated by microcomputers or personal computers.
Well, that's pretty interesting. And you mentioned your books earlier, so I know you can't speak up on all of it, but could you just spare us maybe one or two tips from the book that have been particularly influential, or you've gotten feedback from readers that they really liked?
Um, I've gotten pretty good feedback for building insanely great products, which takes you through the 5 keys to success. It's a little under 200 pages. And then I've got really good feedback on Successful Product Design and Management Toolkit, which Wiley published. It's a little 796-page pamphlet, and it's got one whole section that covers product market strategy, another section that covers marketing, another section that covers the soft skills, another section that covers product technical documentation, and so forth. And it's been used as a textbook at Lovely Professional University in India and at IIPM, which is a prestigious business school in India. And well over 1,000 people have gone through a 6 or 7 month intensive product management training course with that book as the basis.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much for all that insight. And for somebody that may be intrigued at actually doing this, what would be your rundown of the process of building a successful product from idea to startup launch?
Well, it's working out the 32 elements of the product market strategy And that
Mm-hmm.
gives you the fundamentals, as I mentioned earlier, that can then let you write the go-to-market plan and the product launch. Because the messaging that you're going to put in your public relations, in your advertising, in your emails, in your social media posts and everything has to be driven by your product positioning, which
Right.
is driven by your market research and your competitive research. And again, understanding what it is that your customer wants to do. Many times I've said, people come to me with their company or their product. They says, can you help me get some customers? And they haven't done that groundwork yet. So they
Right.
don't know who their target customer is. They don't know its persona. They don't know what key selling points there are because the product positioning hadn't been done. And I go back to my example at Apple, where the chief architect of the Apple III was never asked who he built the computer for. And
Right.
as a result, the marketing department at Apple, which consisted of a lot of people with MBAs, was floundering around for about 3 years, not able to figure out what the product is and who would be interested in buying it.
Now you made me think of like an interesting question here. So, what would you say is your pet peeve when you're brought on board into a project? Like, what's the number one thing? Like, you don't have to tell them. You might. Right now is your perfect chance to air it out. Like, what's that pet peeve when you're brought on? Like, you're just like, oh man, I hate this.
Well, I go back to the example when I became the group product manager for the Apple III. I had, I think, two or three product managers working for me,
Mm-hmm.
and I had no budgetary authority, no authority whatsoever, but I had the full responsibility for the product line. So one of the
Mm.
things I wanted to do right away is boost sales. So I put together a promotion along with my team, and we took it to the promotions marketing liaison group in, in the division, who took it to a similar group at corporate, who took it to the marketing group at corporate, who then took it to the sales group at corporate, who then
Mm-hmm.
took it to the salespeople at corporate, who then took the plan to the principal of the distributors that we used around the country, who then in turn took it to the dealer, who then in turn took it to the principal of the dealer, who then in turn took the promotion to the salesperson on the floor. And one of the things I did when I first joined Apple is I took a part-time job working nights and weekends at a
Mm-hmm.
local computer store in Fremont, California, where I lived at the time, because I wanted to see what happened on the computer floor in that transaction between the salesperson and the people walking in the door looking to buy a personal computer.
Mm-hmm.
So I was 8 levels removed from actually having any impact on that communication transaction between the salesperson and the prospective customer. So this is one of the things I mentioned to Scully in that meeting with him about what should we do about the Apple III, and what do you mean we pale face? I described what I just described there, and I said, you know what it's like pushing a wet noodle, and how
Woohoo!
frustrating it is to get anything done, because all of those different groups have different motivations. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
some of them want to push other products versus your product. Uh, and I give you an example of that. The advertising department was going to run an ad for Great Plains Accounting, and I
Mm-hmm.
think Doug Burgo, the governor of North Dakota, that was the company he started. And there was an accounting package that we had contracted with them to write for the Apple III, and they were like 6 months behind schedule. Well, our marketing advertising department had written some ads, and this discussion I had was like in May of that year, and they're going to run these ads in August. I said, well, the product's not going to be ready yet, so don't run this $1 million worth of ads.
Right.
And the advertising guy said, I don't care, we're going to run the ads. And I couldn't stop them, so they ran the ads, and then I got anecdotal information that
Mm-hmm.
customers who saw the ad, you could now do your accounting for your small and medium business on a personal computer. And they went into the computer dealerships, many of which sold both Apple and IBM PCs.
Right.
And they said, I'd like to get this Great Plains accounting package. And the dealer would say, well, we only have it for the IBM PC. So what these guys effectively did in the Apple advertising department was help drive sales and help the IBM PC with a hard drive called the PCXT be successful. And because the dealer didn't care what the brand they bought, and the customer didn't care. They just wanted to get their accounting done.
And what would you say would be your second biggest pet peeve when you're brought into a project? Your face said that you have a lot of pet peeves when you get brought into a project. I know you got a lot. Give it to me.
Well, it's not having access to the senior management such that
Oh.
they will try to get them to sign on to the product plan. Like when I wrote the product introduction plan, the PIP for the Apple profile, senior management did not read it. And so they substituted what was in the plan, their own thoughts and ideas, and rewrote the plan without writing it down. So the implementation of the product introduction did not go successfully. One of the challenges for product managers is to get the executive management team on the same page. I was consulting for a company called Usendit, which was a managed file transfer company. And they had a professional product, and they had followed the freemium model. So they had tens of thousands of people that were using the product for free, and they had less than 1,000 customers for the professional product, where people paid a monthly subscription fee. And I went to, I put together a product plan for that product, and went to the CFO, and she said, "What are you talking to me for? I don't care." Yet, if we wanted to run some promotions to support the plan, she had veto power over it.
Right.
So that was frustrating. They didn't listen to me, so they went out of business. And many companies that I consulted with that refused to listen to my advice have gone out of business.
So what I'm also hearing is when a company signs on to you and your business, you want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that if the business is set to grow and prosper, that heed the advice, because it's not coming out of an emotion like, hey, I don't want to insult you, but A, B, C, and D needs to be changed, and then the owners or the management are disregarding it, are saying like, you don't know what you're talking about, despite the fact that they're bringing you on board to improve.
Yeah, they don't say that I don't know what I'm talking about. They just ignore it and do whatever they want. Give you the analogy. When a football team puts together their game plan, that's their strategy for the game.
Right.
They go and tell all of 53 players on the team what the game plan is. But in business, you put together the game plan, the business plan, the product market strategy, and some people say don't tell anybody about it because you've got to keep it secret. And that ultimately results in the failure of the product and the product line.
And I gotta ask you again, what would be your third biggest pet peeve when you're brought into a product opportunity like that?
Well, I think it's not having the information to make the decision. When I was working on a consulting project for a $4 billion a year division of a big networking company, they were trying to figure out how they could compete with Huawei in China and with, forget the name of the company, Daewoo, I think it is, in India, or it's the other way around. I needed market research in order to help figure out an appropriate strategy. So I went to the marketing department, the market research department at that company, and I found that they subscribed to about 80 some market research reports, which I was quite familiar with because I worked for a while at DataQuest, which is a market research company, and I was the associate director of the personal computer industry service. So I wanted to talk to those kinds of analysts and read their reports on this networking services business. And they told me they don't subscribe to any of the services add-ons to the subscriptions that this company was already subscribing to. So I asked them if they could, and they said, yeah, we'll put it in the budget. And I asked them this, it'll be something like in June of that year. And they said, we'll put it in the budget. The budget turnover is August 1st, probably get approved around October 1st. And then maybe by January, February of next year, we could buy those add-on services so you can get the information that you need. I said, that's wonderful, except this is a 6-month project. I would have been gone for about 6 months by the time you got the information that I need to make recommendations today. When I worked at Hewlett-Packard, it was the same kind of a thing. Centralized market research in a company is not flexible enough and quick enough to have the information available for decisions that need to be made yesterday.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. Now, okay, final question. For those that are thinking about starting a career in either product management or entrepreneurs that are starting to, game plan, write a business plan, starting to think about launching a product or a service, would you tell them to make sure that if they are going to do what they're doing, that they need to make sure that they're documenting, they're reviewing everything, so that way if they do bring aboard somebody with more expertise later down the line, that they can quickly expedite the process and scale what they have so far?
Yeah, very much so. Be sure to put your product market strategy and your other plans, if you're responsible for it, your sales plan, your marketing plan, your pricing strategy, your support plan, your trading plan for your product or your service. Write it all down. It doesn't have to be in text. It could be as a series of PowerPoint slides.
Okay, definitely. You made me think of another question. What would be one thing that you would tell a younger version of yourself before you actually started this career, whether it is to stop and change your career path, do something else, or whether a piece of advice into it, or any suggestion, so that way somebody that's listening that may be at that position may also heed those words as well.
I think there's two things. One is get an internship, like a product management internship. And I noticed a bunch of them beginning to pop up listed on LinkedIn. Um, you get that. And second, part of that is take the courses, read the books, write a product market strategy, even if it's for a fictitious product. So when you go in for your interview, you bring your little binder along that says, here, look at this product market strategy, which proves that you know how to do the job. And that's the number one question that hiring managers, product managers, want to know, is that the person that they're hiring knows what they're doing. And the second thing is values. As I was writing my book, Building and Selling Great Products, and I talk about values, I thought it'd be interesting to go back to the first Fortune 500 list from 1965 and ask myself, did these companies have values? Did these companies follow those values? And are they still around today? And almost without exception, those companies from that time period, and I was familiar with many of them because I had started a nationwide student organization in support of the supersonic transport in 1970, and also later in support of science and technology, and ended up moving the nonprofit association to Washington, D.C. after I graduated, and lobbied the Congress for a national energy plan, of which I was not successful, but also for the space shuttle, getting that built, and for which I was successful. So I had funding from about
Pretty cool.
100 of those 500 Fortune 500 companies. And as a result, having read their annual reports and knew personally their chairman of the board, or the presidents of those companies, I knew which ones had values and those that did not have values or did not follow their values. And without exception, they went out of went out of business if they didn't have values or didn't follow their values. Then I thought, I wonder how that pertains to personal values and an organization's values. So I made a list of the 25 organizations, for profit and nonprofit, homeowners associations, and so forth. And the first column is, do they have values? And put a check mark in there. Second column is, do they follow values? And in some instances, like the company I was working for before I started Spice Catalyst,
Mm-hmm.
adopted my values, which was a combination of HP's and Apple's, but did not follow them. Never ever had everybody in the company sit down and talk about these values. And one of the reasons I quit is that my values were in conflict with their values.
Mm-hmm.
So I thrived in 3 or 4 of these organizations. I was very, very happy. The rest, I either got fired or I quit. And it was like a mercy killing. I felt better the next day after getting out of those situations in which the values didn't match or they didn't follow the values they claimed to espouse. I told that to a friend of mine who was my Maui condo vacation rental property manager, who had
Mm-hmm.
come back to the Bay Area and he was looking around for a job. I said, when you go in for your interview, my advice is after they ask you a bunch of questions, you ask them what their values are, what the company's values are. And you try to ascertain if they follow those values. And then before you accept the job there, make sure that it maps to your personal values. He said he went on his next interview and he talked to the hiring manager for about 4 hours, all about values. They ended up making him an offer, hiring him, and he says he's very happy and very successful at that company.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Wow. Oh my goodness. Yo, I definitely need to bring you back. Thank you so much for bringing and providing like a tsunami full of knowledge and a whole lot of wealth of experiences. Wow, thank you so much, David, for providing all that information. Guys, that brings us to the end of this fascinating episode of our Gamer's Guide to Productivity. I definitely need to bring David back. Thank you for sharing this amazing journey, all this invaluable insights into building successful products, as well as how to improve over time. It's such an honor to have a legendary figure, a pioneer into the product management world on this show. Like, I used to study this in school, computer engineering. We had classes about the actual storage drives from when it started. We had to practice on DOS and MS DOS, and we saw the floppies, and it just crazy to have somebody that was in the actual tangibles making it happen. Guys, remember to check out David's book, Building Insanely Great Products, Organizing and Managing Insanely Great Products, and Successful Product Design and Management Toolkit for more of his expert guidance on product management. If you specifically enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Share it with somebody who would also value it. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations and practical advice on achieving your productivity goals. Is there anything else that you want to say before I close, David?
Just thanks for putting up with me.
Oh no, thank you for providing all that amazing information. I was able to truly absorb a lot of uh, the information on product management. Guys, until next time, I'm Nico Penguin, and this is the Gamer's Guide to Productivity. Keep leveling up and staying productive.